Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is a podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Joy Ballentine, author of the book AFM. AFM is both an adventure and a love story, and Joy is going to tell us all about it. Joy, welcome to the Books on Air podcast.
Thank you so much, Sloan.
So let's start out by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, AFM.
I was born and raised in New England. You can probably tell by the funny accent. And I sat down at my computer, and I always start with one line and I see where it goes. And my grandfather had antique bikes and my dad had some bikes. So I figured, well, why not? We'll see what happens with this. And that's how it started.
And away you went. So tell us what the title AFM means.
AFM stands for all fucking mine. The woman in the story was engaged to an SOB, and he sold her bike and her car. So she bought another car and she went to register it, and she's in the town office, and the woman says, well, you can have vanity plates if you want. She says, okay. And what do you want them to say? And she says, AFM. And the woman behind the glass, who is very snooty, says, and what does that stand for? And she says, all fucking mine. And the woman about shit herself right then and there, but that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. So that's the gist of that. But she's going it her way, and it's all hers. And she got her stuff back, and that's what she wanted, you know?
Yeah.
She fought for herself. She was with the SOB for 3 years, and he changed her and made her not what she was. And she owns a motorcycle shop, and the guys that work for her saw this happening, and they'd joke with her and you know, give her a little bit of a hard time, but they weren't mean about it. And the other main character is Axel, and he's her head mechanic. Mm-hmm. And this is their love story.
Okay. So can you set the scene for us a little bit and tell us where it takes place and what time period?
It takes place now, and it takes place in the South. Mm-hmm. So the man that she was supposed to marry, his name is Roland, and she tried to call him Rolly, but she's from New York, so it came out Rowley. So and Mama thought that was funny, so Mama calls him Rowley too. And you know, she eye rolls a lot at Mama. Her wedding day was planned by Mama. Her dresses were all chosen by Mama, and her friggin' hair, oh my loving Jesus, was planned by Mama. So she's got pin curls. Oh my God, she's got enough equipment in her hair to keep the pins in, you know, to keep the curls in.
Right.
And she makes an agreement with Axel that he is supposed to show up at the church at 10:15. And he says, what are you planning? And she says, revenge.
Oh. So tell us, what's the main character's name?
Bridget. And her nickname is Brie.
Okay.
And and she became Bridget with Roland, and Bridget and Brie obviously they're the same person, but they're two separate people.
Yeah.
And Axel tells her point blank, I want Brie back. Bridget's okay. I like Brie. Brie's fun. You know, Bridget has a pole up her ass. So, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's something most women can relate to, right? Being with somebody. I mean, we've all been there most likely where we were in a relationship that sucked or that the person wasn't good for us. And we become this different version of ourselves, this different person. Yes. And then, you know, you're around other people and they're like, what happened to you? And it's like, you don't even notice it.
Yeah. You used to be fun. And
right.
Did somebody smack you? Did you get dropped on your head as a child? What happened? You know?
Right. Where did the old you go? Right.
Exactly. You know, and and she finds herself through Axel and the guys at the garage, and the bar they go to is called Chaps. And, you know, she has fun when she goes there, and her best friend Callie comes for a visit, and they go out and they have a good time. And she gets back to herself,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a good read. There's a lot in it. You know, I can't, there's a lot in it.
Yeah.
But you know, the main gist is Axel and Brie,
Yeah.
you
And so
know,
tell us some of your favorite parts that you got to write about in the book.
the motorcycles. I love the old bikes.
Mm-hmm.
I liked writing about the bar. That was fun. Chaps, that was fun. Some of the other characters, because they're very Southern.
Yeah.
Good God. And
I live in the South. I get it.
you understand? Yeah, I'm right now. I'm in North Carolina, so I fully understand. They don't quite get Northern humor.
Mm-hmm.
They mean to, and they'll giggle and laugh and smile. You're looking at them going, "There's not a bubble in there anywhere that understood what I was saying." You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's her Roland's family is very, we know everything about everything. Ask us, because we are, you know, town shit here. We know all about
Right.
all.
Right.
And you know, 3 hours away, they've never heard of these people.
Right. Right.
So you know, they're small fish in a big pond.
Right.
And it's just, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, you know. And there's the her maid of honor was going to be a relative's wife, and you know, she did whatever the husband said, and it was yes dear, no dear.
Mm-hmm.
Do you never have an original thought ever? I
Right.
mean, wow, that's bad. So you know, it's crazy.
Well, and it sounds like your book is very relatable for women who various phases we went through in our lives, and the things that you learn along the way, right? Those important lessons that you learn, and there's no other way to learn it than experience it.
Exactly. And you know, and the way I write, or the way I try to write anyway, is that I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
These people are having a conversation. We're listening to their conversation, and we too are rolling our eyes, scratching our heads, and going, "What the fuck?"
Right. Right.
What the hell happened there? You know? So,
right. Well, and that's like real life with friends or, you know, family members. You know, you do that in real life, and it's like, and you know, it's funny because it's always so easy to look at other people and think, what the fuck, or look at, you know, but then when we look at our own selves, we can't see it, you know?
Right. Exactly. You're living it. You're going, no, there's no way that's me. And then you're out of it and you're going, oh God, that was so me. You know? Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, oh my God, why didn't I listen? Well, hindsight is 2020, always. You know?
Yes. Oh yes, totally. I totally get that. And I think probably most of the listeners are laughing and shaking their heads because they probably have been in a similar situation.
Exactly. We all know someone like Roland. We all know someone like Axel. We all know someone like Brie, and a few of the other characters. We all know people, you know, like them. And it's like, okay, that was my best friend. That was her boyfriend, you know, and that was the situation they were in at the time. And this happened, so we can change it and make it this way, you know, and that's the fun of writing. You can make whatever you want happen.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Letting that creativity flow and really taking, like we've been saying, these relatable real life situations and being able to weave them together to tell a story that it sounds like that you really enjoyed writing, and also that you've been able to, you know, create these characters and this story in such a way that everybody who picks up the book will relate to it.
Exactly. I hope so. I mean, I had an absolute ball writing this. You know, and it was, when I got done with it, it was over 600 pages. Yeah. And it's like, well, damn.
Right.
How thick is this flipping book gonna be? And when you go back and edit it, you're like, I don't know what she was thinking, but we're not doing that. So you delete a couple pages and, oh, okay, now it makes sense, you know?
Right.
And then it, you know, it progresses from there, and you get it set up, and it's like, okay, I think this is good to sell. I think.
Right.
I'm hoping. So, you know, and my publisher seemed to like it, so we went from there. You know.
Right. Yeah. And so when you're going through that process, what surprised you the most about writing your book?
I think that anybody actually wanted to buy it. You know, because like I said, it's me talking basically I talk to myself a lot. But it's me talking and explaining situations. And I give a lot of detail in the book because I want people to know what's going on and what's being worn and what's being said and what the atmosphere is, and I had a couple of people read it prior to sale and they're like, well, you don't have to explain da 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 da. Yeah, I kind of do, because if I don't, you can be like, well, what was she doing? Well, hello, it's all answered.
Right. I do a lot of these interviews and I ask that question to most people about what surprised them about writing their book. And most people say the same thing, that they're surprised that they actually wrote it, or they're surprised that anybody actually wanted to read it. And I'm always amazed by that, though, because we all have this doubt within ourselves. Right. But when we move past that and we're able to, use our creativity and shine and put our creativity out into the world, it's just think if every person on the earth listened to that voice that said they couldn't do it, then we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't have any books, right? We wouldn't have any, we would all keep it all in. So congratulations to you for moving past that and getting your book out there.
Thank you so much. And in my own head, I'm thinking, Stephen King got rejected how many flipping years before he sold everything? So I'm not doing that bad.
Right. Yeah. And, you just keep moving forward. It's just like an analogy for life. We just keep moving forward and putting ourselves out there.
Adapt, adjust, and move forward.
That's right.
You kind of have to. And you got to push yourself to do what you're uncomfortable with, because it's not going to be bad. It's going to be fine. It always works itself out. That's just life,
That's so right. And, it's just listening to you talk about it and just your upbeat voice and your I feel just you're very relatable. Like we've only just met, but I do feel like I know you, and it's such an easy conversation with you. So I can imagine your writing style being the same and really drawing the reader in that way.
Exactly. When I write, like I said, I'm talking to the reader, and I try to make it make sense. Because I've written some stuff going, what the hell was I thinking? How many rum and cokes did I have?
Right.
And one, don't do that. Do not sit in front of the computer with a rum and coke and say, we're going to write today, because it never comes out good. Oh my God. But I try to make it as relatable as possible and as user-friendly as possible. I had one friend of mine read it, and he's like, you swear a lot. I said, it's a fucking garage. What do you want? Good God. Dude.
Right.
Really? Well, you don't have to shut up. Just stop talking to me. Oh, my head.
So who would you say your book would appeal to and why?
I think it would appeal to anybody that's ever owned a motorcycle. Anybody that's ever owned an old car. Anybody that's been in love, had a fight with their spouse or their intended, or ever, had a fit at a wedding and just didn't want to be there. One of the points in the book is, the preacher, who's a pompous son of a bitch, gets to the point of, does anybody object? Brie raises her own hand.
At her own wedding.
At her own wedding, and that's why Axel picks her up at 10:15. It's like, okay, And when I'm writing it, I'm going, this is good.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you get in the characters, right? You can actually feel and experience that. I would think as you're writing.
Exactly. All my female characters, my main characters, are little bits of me. Some of them have blonde hair, green eyes. They're 5'7". That's me. Other than that, there's little other things, like their hair can't hold the curl. Mine can't either.
Mine can't either.
I understand. Oh my God,
totally get it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you sit for days with curlers. You pull it out 20 minutes later. It's like, oh, that was fun. It's arrow straight. Thank you.
Yes.
They don't wear a lot of makeup. Neither do I. They wear a lot of jewelry. Well, so do I. But it's little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And me, myself, and I think they're all good people.
Yeah. That sounds like it. It sounds, like I said, like a really fun read.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely.
What do you want the readers to take away after reading your book?
I want them to know that there is love and there's hope, and don't quit. Don't give up.
Yeah. I mean, such an important message, and so simple, but so important to remind people of, and to remember, and to, just like we talked about with the writing process and self-doubt that a lot of us feel. It doesn't have to be about writing. It could be about anything in life, but being able to remember, everybody goes through it. You're not alone. And like you said, you can do it. Like, you can do these things. It'll work itself out. And
it's weird, karma, or whatever you want to call it. It eventually things work the way they're supposed to, no matter what it is.
Right.
It might take a while, but you will eventually get to it, and get to the right area that you're supposed to be at,
Yeah.
So
I totally agree.
And like I said, there's hope, and there's love, and there's laughter in this book, and there's fighting in this book, and there's revenge, which I love, and it's all good. It's all good stuff. It's all good. And you learn about his family and why Mama is the way she is. And, it explains. It's all in the crazy amount of pages. It's all explained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like such an amazing book, and just, again, so relatable. And anytime, you can always relate to something when a story is being told. Like, it's like we were talking about, like when you see somebody else going through it, it's very easy to relate to. Yes, and so it sounds like your book has captured that. And it sounds like an amazing story.
I thank you so much. And I hope everybody goes out and gets a copy. They're available at Amazon.
Yes. So I'll link to that in the show notes for the listeners so they can easily find it. And we're coming up on time, Joy. So I guess it's time to wrap up, but it's been so great to talk to you today.
And you too.
Yeah. And thank you for coming on. Is there any closing thought you want to leave the readers with today, to make sure that they know about you or your book?
I had another book come out a few years ago called Slow Hands. That was my first book. I wrote it in 3 weeks. So it's pretty much self-explained, why it is the way it's written. And then AFM is my second, and I have another one coming out called Wake. And I'm not sure when that's coming, but hopefully soon. So
amazing.
Those are my 3. So, but just please enjoy the book. It's made for everyone. Even if you don't like motorcycles, read it anyway. It's a good story. It's a really good story.
Well, it sounds like it is. And Joy, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and being our guest on Books on Air.
Thank you so much, Sloan. This was great.
Yes, a lot of fun. And you can find out more about the book AFM on Amazon, as we mentioned, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.